Good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday, March 6th. And today I'm going to be talking about the veto queen governor in Arizona, Katie Hobbs. And I'm going to kind of go over the bills and things that had come to her desk from the legislation here at the Capitol that she vetoed 323. And the latest one was the bill. It was kind of shaped after what Texas was doing right now. They had the legislators had brought forward a bill to Katie Hobbs' desk that would make it a crime to cross the border into Arizona, and that law enforcement would be able to arrest these people. And let me see. I want to read this because it's like, oh my goodness sakes. I'm sorry. I thought I had this pulled up and waiting in my bar that I could just pull over. Anyway, she was saying that the bill did not protect the border and that it would cause more mayhem for law enforcement if they started arresting these people. And that is absolutely the words of somebody who doesn't understand border security. She's like a child, the way she talks. And I don't even, when you hear that voice, I immediately get the sense that it's a person who really doesn't understand what's going on around them. Like a valley girl from California, that high pitched, squeaky voice. And, of course, her eyes look blank most of the time because she's reading from a monitor and I don't even think that she has gone into any sort of committee meetings or had discussions with any organization or group, honestly, about some really good border security legislation for Arizona. I just don't even think she's interested in even having those discussions. And that's pretty sad when Arizona is the place where 80% of fentanyl crosses the border to come into the United States. And fentanyl is causing over 120,000 fentanyl poisoning deaths in the United States on an annual basis now. So let me go back. It's pretty interesting because she's been dubbed the veto queen here in Arizona. She's blackballed more than 24 bills, including one about abortion, one about sex offenders, and another one about stealing garden gnomes. I will support legislation regardless of where it comes from. You know what? I'm going to share this with you so you can see what I'm reading from. I will support legislation regardless of where it comes from, but I will not sign into law any legislation that attacks people's rights and doesn't address serious issues. There is an appetite to send me things that don't meet those criteria, but that doesn't mean I'm not willing to work with folks to tackle the real issues. Well, the border is a real issue, Hobbs, and this bill was straightforward. And so from a bill forcing cities to hold gun shows to a bill mandating that banks open accounts for gun manufacturers, here are all the bills that Hobbs has killed. SB 1523 to SB 1535. She tore out of the starting blocks back in February, and this was in 2022. 2023. Each of these bills was a component of the Republican 2024 budget proposal. Each piece passed the Arizona House and State by a slim party vote. Rather than tackling difficult choices, this budget presents Arizona's with false choices. She said, I reject these false choices because I'm an optimist, particularly when it comes to Arizona. So SB 1184, she vetoed that on February 23rd. The bill prohibited cities and towns from taxing renters. Their measure was an attempt to assuage housing costs, but it came under fire for being unconstitutional. She said that it didn't have an enforceable mechanism to ensure renters are provided relief for working families faced with ever-increasing rental prices. This proposal just doesn't fit the bill. Okay. In March, she vetoed SB 1247. It was the first bill with bipartisan support to die in the governor's office. The bill repealed the sunrise process, a cumbersome step required by healthcare professionals who are seeking to expand their scope of practice that involves defending the expansion of to a legislative committee. And all Republican lawmakers and 21 Democrats supported the measure. But Hobbs said it is unfortunate that she had to wield her veto stamp, but that doing so was necessary after the bill was fast-tracked to her desk. SB 1305 vetoed in March of last year. The bill prohibited K through 12 public schools from teaching a variety of race-related instruction. SB 1063, the bill eliminated taxes on groceries in Arizona. She vetoed it. SB 1096, the bill required public entities to only do business with companies that provide a written certification that they do not and will not discriminate against a firearm entity or firearm trade association. Vetoed it. SB 1024, the bill targeted unsheltered people, including by making it illegal for a person to remain in a sitting position on a public sidewalk. And she said that we need to resolve these issues in a meaningful way. This bill only makes them less visible. SB 1250, the bill required employers to allow employees to opt out of vaccine requirements for religious reasons. And it also prohibited employers from discriminating against employees based on vaccination status. She vetoed it because she said it's unnecessary. She condemned the action as unnecessary, seeing as legal protections for an employee's religious beliefs already exist under federal employment law. Listen, how many people did we hear about during this whole COVID mandatory vaccine thing who were fired anyway for religious beliefs? So she's absolutely out of touch with reality. And she said this bill also threatens employers with a civil penalty and a hefty fine, which would be devastating for Arizona's many small businesses. Well, then don't break the laws. It's pretty simple. Gosh, I mean, she is so out there. She vetoed one on HB 2427. The bill elevated a misdemeanor assault charge to a felony aggravated assault charge if the victim is a pregnant woman, provided the offender is aware that the woman is pregnant. She says, as a social worker who spent years serving in Arizona's largest domestic violence shelter, I've seen firsthand the needs of victims seeking safety and stability, and I encourage the legislator to focus on those needs, including increased funding for services and economic support for victims. That doesn't make any sense why she vetoed it. She doesn't even give it a proper explanation. SB 2440, this was vetoed back in April 2023. The bill required power companies to prioritize grid reliability and affordability to retail customers. Hobbs said the bill creates regulatory uncertainty when reliability and affordability may be at odds. HB 2472, the bill prohibited the state from requiring banks to use a social credit score in determining whether to lend money. She vetoed it. My administration looks forward to working with the legislator to increase financial inclusion and access to capital for underserved communities, but this bill does not address those challenges. No, because it addresses everybody. And all she wants to do is make sure that financial inclusion is happening, and that the underserved communities are addressed because, we're such a racist nation and a racist state. That's said with sarcasm. Vetoed on April 3rd last year, the bill declared that dry washes, desert riverbeds that only fill with water when flooded on private property are no longer considered water features in Arizona. And according to federal law, dry washes are water features. This contradiction between the state and federal law would force unnecessary conflict. Arizonans want elected officials to find real solutions to our water challenges. SB 1162, the bill required home-based businesses to be allowed as a use by right. This prevented city officials from being notified about businesses operating in the area. While there is no doubt that more can be done to support small businesses, this approach is far too broad. The bill would create challenges for public safety and code enforcement in neighborhoods. HB 2586, the bill restricted the Arizona Department of Transportation's message signs. And I sued the state on this after my son was killed. But those amber-colored light-up signs that illuminate traffic rules to display only messages that are directly related to transportation or highway public safety. Because they put up there sometimes in Arizona, have a nice day. The wildflowers are blooming. I mean, these are just silly examples, but that have nothing to do with traffic. And you know what? It distracts drivers. So it should only be signs that talk about traffic issues. And the night that my son was killed, as you have this maniac driving the wrong way in the HOV lane on 3-4 different freeways, going, 80 to 104 miles an hour, guess what they had on the signs on the freeway? Conflicting traffic ahead. What the hell does that mean? Why wouldn't they have just put wrong way, driver ahead, exit freeway? That's the most logical thing to put up there. And throughout, of course, the courts threw my case out. I wasn't suing for any money. I was just suing for them to fix this issue, that they had a protocol, because we found out that there was no protocol for these overhead signs on the freeway. And it's just at the whim of the person sitting at the desk that night or on that shift of what they're going to type in to put on those overhead signs with the situation that's happening at the moment on the freeways. So conflicting traffic ahead. What would my son have done if he had seen a sign that said wrong way, driver ahead, exit freeway? What would everybody have done? They had over 81 911 calls from this maniac driving on the freeway. Let me go back to this. I don't know what happened to the article. It went down. Is this still showing on here? So HB 25, okay, that was about the signs. So Hobbs said in her veto, the current standards allow state and local highway agencies the flexibility to display safety messages, transportation-related messages, emergency homeland security messages, and more. The emergency homeland security message would obviously go up there, but transportation-related messages should all, regarding the freeways, is all that should be on there. HB 2535, the bill prohibited wells in unincorporated areas from being subjected to municipal regulation if a municipality were to annex the land on which the well sits. This bill would preclude local communities from exerting any oversight over groundwater wells that may be connected to a municipal system or that impact our precious drinking water aquifers. She vetoed HB 2477. The bill declares the legislator's support for the Electoral College. This bill, which solely expresses a legislative opinion and does not make or change substantive, does not change policy, would be better served as a House resolution. I'm going to skip over some of these. She vetoed SB 1009. The bill upgraded the punishment from tampering with the statue from a misdemeanor to a felony charge. The bill asserted that tampering with any public or private statue should be a felony, meaning the age-old gag of ganking garden gnomes would land an offender with nearly 4 years of prison time. And Hobbs said, state law already provides adequate tools to prosecute criminal damage to the items contemplated in this bill, including Confederate monuments, and increasing the penalties will do little to deter such crime. Okay. So I guess when increasing the penalties will do little to deter such crime. So if you tell a kid in high school, you know, if you go out and decide that you're going to topple the statue in Times Square, or in your city square, town square, you're just going to get a slap on the wrist, and you're going to get fined $1,200, the cost of what it's going to cost to put it back up. They'll keep doing it and hope that they don't get caught. But if the penalty is you will not only be fined, but you will be put in jail for a year or 2 years, do you not think that these people, these kids, these individuals who are doing this sort of thing would stop doing it? The reason why this was going on so much across the country during the Black Lives Matter marches and all that stuff, the George Floyd stuff, was because they weren't punishing these people. Nothing's been done to any of them. All of the damage that was done to our communities during the Black Lives Matter marches and all the Antifa stuff, those people were not held accountable. They haven't paid a dime. They haven't spent a day in jail. A lot of them that were taken in and faced a judge up in Seattle were just given a little slap across their face and said, don't do it anymore. Penalties do matter. She vetoed SB 1253. The bill required registered sex offenders who have children in school to annually provide notice of their registration status to the principal at their child's school. State law mandates that sex offenders continuously report to the Department of Public Safety, which is required by law to notify the school district where the sex offender lives. Hobbs vetoed it and said the Department of Public Safety remains best equipped to oversee all community notification. Wow. She vetoed SB 1257. The bill required the Arizona Department of Water Resources Director to appoint an assistant director because the water director was overwhelmed. A lot of things slipped through the cracks. Of course, Katie Hobbs said it's not necessary. She vetoed SB 1600. The bill ensured that every infant born alive is granted the same rights as any other person, regardless of the infant's stage of development when born. It would also require health care workers to provide life-saving care for all infants born alive, even if the infant is born too early to possibly survive, or if the intervention may be extremely painful or dangerous. She said the bill is uniformly opposed by the medical community and interferes with the relationship between a patient and a doctor. It's simply not the state's role to make such difficult medical decisions for patients. She vetoed House Bill 2322. The bill designated the Secretary of State's July 2020 signature verification guide as the minimum requirements for comparison of signatures. Hobbs told the House the standards in this bill are already several years old. Let's see. HB 2415, she vetoed it. The bill modified the eligibility requirements for a voter to remain on the state's active early voting list, which allows voters to automatically receive ballots in the mail. And Hobbs said, Arizona's active early voting list is secure and convenient for voters. I stand ready to sign bills that make voting more accessible, accurate, and secure. This bill accomplishes none of those goals. I apologize. I don't know if I have a cold coming on. SB 1166, the bill prohibited a public employer from rejecting an applicant solely for not having a post-secondary degree. And she said this bill misses the mark and creates more problems than it solves, ultimately due to its unnecessary and unworkable administrative burden. The bill, SB 1005, the bill prohibited courts from ruling against schools and other governmental entities when sued for violating the Parental Bill of Rights. And she said the bill does not protect parents' rights, but merely encourages litigation, no matter how frivolous, without consequence. She vetoed SB 1027. The bill classified the manufacturing of fentanyl or similar substances that cause physical injury to a child younger than age 15 a felony offense punishable as a dangerous crime against children with a sentence for up to 30 years. She says this bill contradicts Arizona's Good Samaritan law, which was enacted in 2018 and provides legal amnesty for people who intervene to save someone from an opioid overdose. And on April 10th, Governor Hobbs extended the Good Samaritan law until 2028. And she says that I fear this bill would undermine the purpose of that law. Doesn't even make any sense. The Good Samaritan law provides legal amnesty for somebody who may step in and help somebody who's overdosing from an opioid overdose. The bill was wanting to make it a felony offense punishable as a dangerous crime against children with the sentence for up to 30 years if somebody was caught manufacturing fentanyl or similar substances that cause physical injury to a younger child. So she's this is how off whack she is. Just a bunch of water issues. She vetoed House Bill 2552. The bill would prohibit the use of ranked choice voting in Arizona elections. And she said ranked choice voting is an election process that is used successfully elsewhere in the country. As it is not currently utilized in Arizona, this bill is unnecessary. Well, when you're bringing a bill forward to prohibit something, that means it wouldn't be necessary. It opens a door for these Democrats to bring this sort of legislation forward. And I know for a fact that Seth Blattman, who I'm running against here for the Arizona House of Representatives in my district, I know that he was pushing for this ranked choice voting. So this will come up again in the future. And the Republicans were trying to put it in place where it would prohibit it from ever happening. But of course, the Democrats want to leave that door open. She vetoed House Bill 2675. The bill declared the drug cartels a terrorist organization. And she says labeling drug cartels as terrorist organizations to deploy state resources is not a real solution and is not a state function. It's clear there is a lack of understanding of what the Arizona Department of Homeland Security is charged to do for the people of Arizona. No, it's clear that there's a lack of understanding on you as a governor of what you need to be doing and working with the conservative legislators to try and get something happening in this state to stop the flow of drugs and human trafficking through the state of Arizona. She vetoed House Bill 2754. The bill subjected non-governmental organizations, NGOs, to criminal liability for participating in a human smuggling organization. This bill has unintended consequences for organizations that support immigrants. Human smuggling and trafficking is a serious issue that deserves our attention, and I implore the legislator to work with shareholders to find better solutions. That is a good solution because these NGOs are participating in human smuggling. They're encouraging these people to come over the borders in Arizona. They have camps set up. These illegals come to the border in certain areas in Arizona, and they see the camps that these NGOs have set up. I mean, they're rustic, but they've got tents, they've got water, they've got food, and they're able to hang out there because the Border Patrol doesn't come through that area very often and pick them up. So they've got a place to hang out. And of course, you know, these are these Green New Deal climate screamers who are down there, and you should see the camps that they've set up in the middle of the desert here in Arizona. They look like junkyards. you know, they don't even have real tents. They have like tarps that they have set up to try and make tents. But so you think, you know, it's just so funny. It's like even when I look at Ben Berkwin's videos coming through the Darien Gap, and the piles and piles and piles and piles and piles of clothing and trash and wristbands and shoes and mattresses and rafts and umbrellas and empty medication bottles and wrappers and condoms, used, unused, the garbage. If you go and look at his videos on his Instagram, where are the climate activists? They have gone through the Darien Gap, through this virgin jungle, and made it a trash heap. And that's what these NGOs are doing in the desert down in southern Arizona. They're making it a trash heap down there. You know, the illegals were already coming through the deserts in Arizona and leaving their trash. And you could tell where they would be dropped off. They would get, or where they, after they finished crossing through, because they had camouflage clothing on, there would be piles of them. I went down there with Sheriff Lamb, and he took me out to show me certain areas where they knew they came in through these washes and stuff. And they would take all their camouflage clothing off and get the regular clothing out of the backpacks, put them on, and they'd go out to the street so they would look like, you know, farm workers, because it was out in the middle of dairies and ranches and farms and stuff. And they had guys that worked at the dairy. When they got off work, they would come up this certain road, and if there was illegals waiting along the side of the road, they'd load them into the back of their pickup, and it would appear that they all worked at the dairy, because the guys driving the truck, if they were pulled over by law enforcement, they could tell them they worked at the dairy. And yeah, these guys are just day workers that we brought in. You know, it's all a facade. But Katie Hobbs is out of touch with reality. I mean, stopping these NGOs is what we need to be doing, because they're the ones that the ACLU, all these different organizations, they're the ones that are going to continue to fight to have this illegal immigration. Catholic Charities, I can't even remember, think of some of the names, Casa Luna, all these ones that are here in Arizona, the secret ones that have been uncovered by Fox News and by Ben Berkwin and different ones. They're making buku bucks, folks. They want this to continue. They don't want it stopping. Why would they? They came out of nowhere making nothing, and now they're making millions and billions of dollars a year given to them by the federal government. And mind you, it's taxpayer money that you and I are paying the government. Let me see. Some of these bills are just like silly stuff. I'm sorry. She vetoed SB 1565, which prohibits the use of artificial intelligence software for election proceedings in Arizona. And she says, I believe that there are opportunities to work together to tackle the challenges facing elections in Arizona. This bill instead attempts to solve challenges that do not currently face our state. All of this type of stuff, when she says this isn't currently facing our state, the ranked choice voting, the using our AI in election software, all of these things that we know are going to be happening, that are coming up through the ranks, and the conservative legislators are trying to put a stop at the past so that it can't just keep moving forward. She doesn't have that vision. And all she's going to keep saying with her Democratic, little minions who are in her office, are activists, that they want to stop the Republicans and the conservatives from putting these roadblocks up for these things to progress in the state of Arizona. That's scary stuff. She should have passed that sort of thing. She vetoed House Bill 2394. This bill prohibits taxation of firearm accessories and ammunition if the tax could have a chilling effect on the people buying those items. She said that the bill exempts the firearm industry from the same basic regulation to which all other industries are accustomed. That was her one sentence letter to the House. HB 2691, the bill required each county board of supervisors to provide a chain of custody record for every ballot in an election. She says, as I have stated previously, I am eager to work with the legislator to advance legislation that strengthens our elections. This bill, unfortunately, does not advance that goal. Really? Chain of custody for every ballot in an election doesn't advance that role? By the way, Governor, as you were Secretary of State, how's the cleaning up the voter rolls going? Because that's a huge problem here in Arizona. You know, are you pressuring the Secretary of State? Are you about election integrity? Are you trying to do things that are proactive in this situation? No, I doubt it. Because listen, folks, with this presidential preference election that's coming up, and I had called in after the 2020 elections and got a hold of all of my kids. Of course, I can't get a hold of Brandon, but got a hold of my son who's in San Antonio, got a hold of my other son who's in Georgia, and let them know that I'm still getting ballots here at the house. And my son in Georgia said, Kelly and I called. We got online. We did everything we needed to do to stop the mail-in ballots from happening. We unregistered in Arizona. We registered to vote in Georgia. He said he had done that years ago when they moved there. My son in San Antonio, I heard through a family member that he did the same thing. So what do I get? Ballots for both of my sons who live out of state and who have gone online and registered in the states that they live in. And I get a ballot for my son who was killed almost 10 years ago. Still, I'm still getting them at my house. So the importance of voter records being updated is very, very important. And I always make this comparison with people. You know, if somebody is declared deceased, they have to contact the Office of Vital Records, and the death certificates happen. And, you know, that's where the birth certificates and death certificates, they are contacted in order to create that death certificate. Why is there not some sort of connection between the computer systems at the Office of Vital Records and the recorders or the Secretary of State office to where this person is removed from the voter rolls immediately? You know, we live in a computerized world, but this kind of stuff never happens when it needs to. These people who've passed away will be on the voter records for years and sometimes decades. And that's where the Democrats really pulled off some good ones, you know, and even had vacant lots where they had like 50, 60 people registered to vote. And you know, they were going to check on these things, and they were vacant lots. There wasn't even a house there. How could 60 people live there? Who are these 60 people? Do they even exist? Have they died? Have they passed on? Is this a fake voter registration that happened? All of these things. So when you've got a governor who really isn't paying attention to all of the things that happen, could happen, would happen, and to not require the county board of supervisors to provide a chain of custody record for every ballot in an election, she vetoes it. She says it doesn't advance the goal of election integrity. Listen, there was a huge problem with chain of custody in the ballots here in Maricopa County. Huge problem in 20 and 22. So I really think the legislation needs to relook at that and possibly have a vote on it and override the veto. They need to start doing some of the things on these important bills. You see. Oh, one was about vaccines, making them optional. FDA approved emergency vaccines optional for school-age children. She vetoed that. The bill allows third-party providers. Oh, that's no big deal. She vetoed House Bill 2379. This bill prohibits the city, town, or county, or the state from requiring a hotel or motel to participate in a program that houses unsheltered people. And Hobbs says this legislation is unnecessary. Hotels and motels in Arizona have never been required to accept a voucher to house someone, and no proposal to do so is under consideration here. Well, good. Sign a bill that prohibits it so it'll never happen here. Because look at New York City. How many of those hotels and unsheltered people doesn't just mean homeless Americans, folks. This means illegal aliens also. You know, they use the and I guess that's why the Republicans use that kind of verbiage, unsheltered people, because maybe the government is using that sort of thing. But how many of the hotels there in New York City, you know, I know it's a financial incentive because they may have 100 rooms in a hotel and they're guaranteed that they're going to get $200 a night for those rooms. Every single room, they're going to pay $200 a night. And we're doing this contract for 6 months or a year. That's guaranteed income. You know, and hotels really face times when, and, you know, during the week when it's slow and those types of things. Weekends obviously get busier, but they're guaranteed that income. They may have a 100-room hotel and have 50 of them vacant during the week and not fill up until the weekend. So why wouldn't these hotels do this sort of thing? But in certain areas, like what was happening here in Scottsdale, and this was kind of brought forward several years ago, where they realized that some of these hotels were all of a sudden being shut down. Their signs were covered up along the freeway. And, you know, the buses from the border were showing up and they were unloading busloads of illegals into these hotels here in Scottsdale and Ahwatukee and Phoenix. And I'm sure, you know, it was a financial incentive because they weren't the best hotels, but requiring them, mandatory anything in this country, and especially in the state of Arizona, where our legislators are trying to protect its citizens and business owners, there could come a point in time when the government, the federal government, decides that it's going to be mandatory. You know, and this only talks about prohibits a city, town, county, or the state from requiring a hotel or motel. You know, I think that's dangerous ground, and I think that Hobbs should have had a bigger conversation with them and not use the excuse that there's no proposal to do so that's under consideration at the time. We have to be proactive, folks. We have to think, and we have to be one step ahead of the government and the city officials and the elected officials. And we're not stupid. And these legislators down at the Capitol aren't stupid. They can see where things are headed. And that's why they tried to stop the ranked choice voting. They knew that there were Democrats down there at the Capitol in the legislation that wanted to bring that bill forward. And so they were trying to prevent that from happening. Listen, that Governor Hobbs, she knows that that's happening because those Democratic legislators have gone in and talked to her about it. The Democrats are not going to get any bill put through here in Arizona because we do have the slight majority in the House and the Senate. So the Democrat bills are kind of put off to the wayside. And thank goodness, because a lot of them are absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, we had one Democratic legislator who is in my district, who I'm trying to get out of there, that she wanted to go through all of the verbiage of the Arizona's laws and bills and stuff and change the word he to person because she's an LGBTQ activist. And so that's unnecessary. When Hobbs says this legislation is unnecessary, that's the kind of legislation that's unnecessary. But that's the kind of stuff that she would support. because these Democrats stick together, folks. So SB 1262, this bill required courts to immediately issue a warrant for rearrest of a person who has been charged with a felony offense that was committed during their probation. It also specifies that the person is not eligible for release while revocation proceedings are pending. And Hobbs indicated that she would consider signing a reworked version of the bill in the future. This bill raises due process concerns. Whatever. This one was called the tamale bill. HB 2509, this bill would expand the list of homemade foods that can be sold commercially to include perishable foods and certain items containing meat and dairy. So a lot of these people have food handler licenses, and a lot of the Hispanic neighborhoods and Hispanic women in our communities here in Mesa, in the Valley, they make tamales at Christmas time, and it brings extra income into their families. And tamales is a big thing. And so they wanted to expand, the legislators wanted to expand the list of homemade foods that could be sold commercially. And they had Democrats supporting this. And it flew through, and it went to the governor's desk, and she vetoed it, saying the bill would significantly increase the risk of foodborne illnesses, despite the fact that states with similar laws have reported 0 confirmed cases of foodborne illness. Her veto of the so-called tamale bill kicked up a storm of protests. Now, mind you, the Democrats that voted for it, when Governor Hobbs vetoed it and it came back to the legislation, they decided to vote to override the veto. And every single Democrat that voted for the bill prior to Hobbs vetoing it now voted against it, because, folks, Democrats are given their marching papers, and they're going to vote how they're told to vote by the upper echelon of the Democratic Party. They know they will not get the funding they need to be reelected. They know that they need to follow the path, follow what we're telling you to do. If you want our support, if you want us to make sure you stay in office. So these Democrats, tucked their tails and voted no against it. The very Democrats that are out there pandering to these low-income communities who depend on this sort of thing, the exact ones who are pandering to them are the ones who voted along with the Democratic governor to veto this, and they voted not to override the veto. This bill would require... So she vetoed SB 1021. This bill would require Arizona's Attorney General to defend the constitutionality of any bill passed by the legislator and signed into law by the governor. And Hobbs said the bill would force the Attorney General to defend laws that are legally indefensible. Unfortunately, the legislator has been known to pass laws that its own lawyers advised would not survive constitutional scrutiny. On occasion, the legislator has even passed laws intended to prompt litigation. I encourage the legislator to be more exacting in its deliberations to ensure fidelity at the Constitution, to the Constitution. Anyway, it goes on and on and on. I'm not going to go over a lot of things. Well, here's one. SB 1252, the bill created a committee to review deaths and near deaths resulting from child abuse and neglect. The bill also established the initial terms of committee member service. Hobbs wrote in a letter to the Senate that as a social worker, she wanted to work toward improving existing oversight processes, but found the bill to be harmful and unnecessary. So, we've got CPS here, which is Child Protective Services here in Arizona, and a lot of things have gone unnoticed. I mean, they've been out to homes where there were abused children in those homes, and they've just overlooked this sort of thing. So as a social worker, she wants to work towards improving existing oversight processes. I think there needs to be a committee to review the deaths and near deaths resulting from child abuse and neglect. The bill protected... So HB 2312, the bill protected women's shelters from being liable for gender discrimination if they prevented biologically biologically male employees from interacting with women and children in the facility. However, the bill only applied to shelters whose sole purpose is to provide a safe and stable environment. And Hobbs said Arizonans who choose to work in domestic violence shelters and services are among our most qualified, dedicated public servants who are hired and retained for individual skills, merits, and employment histories, regardless of their sex. They deserve the freedom to live their lives without laws targeting them for their gender identity. Well, the problem with all of this, and she says, instead of improving or facilitating access to the resources that victims need, this misguided and unnecessary legislation merely allows providers to discriminate on the basis of sex. Well, the problem is, you've got these transgender women who show up in women's prisons, and they start raping the women. There's been cases where they've impregnated women in there. She's very short-sighted when she's not realizing that this bill was intended to protect women, battered women and children who are in these facilities, to get away from the men in their lives who are abusing them, and then to have a transgender woman who's biologically a man working there in that environment. Man, I just can't even believe as a woman that of course her gender identity is in question too. This bill authorized. So they had this bill, HB 2428, and it authorized any private college to implement an Arizona Teachers Academy, which is a program that pays tuition for students who agree to teach in Arizona schools. And Hobbs said in her letter that there isn't enough available money in the newly passed budget for the 2024 fiscal year to fund such an expansion. Oh, but you've got Lorena Austin, who's a Democratic legislator who wanted to bring forward a bill that would provide, I think it was $8 million or $80 million to provide college funds for illegals. They've got that kind of money thoughts in their minds to provide it for that. But let's not provide it for people who want to go to college and become a teacher. And if they agree to stay in Arizona, even if it's for 10 years, it would pay for that if we've got good teachers coming out of these Teachers Academy. A lot of this is gun type of stuff. She vetoed HB 2613. This bill prohibited the Arizona Secretary of State from certifying an election or vote tabulating machine unless every single component of the machine is manufactured and assembled in the U.S. Additionally, the machine itself must be assembled in the U.S. She says the bill could create a situation where Arizona's election administrators are no longer able to procure certifiable voting and tabulating equipment. It should be clear how catastrophic that would be for the successful administration of elections in Arizona. Well, you know what? If we're not able to get election tabulation machines and voting and tabulation equipment, if we can't get it, that it's assembled or made in the United States, we're going to buy foreign-made voting and tabulation machines with all their little spyware in it and everything that they could do to access it during election on voting day, then we got a problem. If we don't have companies in the United States willing to make and produce this type of voting and tabulation equipment that we need. Anyway, just on and on and on and on. And some of them, look at this. This list just goes on and on and on and on and on and on of all the bills that she vetoed. So it's like, what a waste of time this session was for the legislators down at the Capitol, because every bill that they worked on, that they had committee hearings on, that they went to the floor and had a vote on, had public interaction at these committee hearings, because a lot of people from the public go and interact with the legislators. The salaries that are paid to the legislators that are down there at the Capitol. All of this is wasted taxpayer money and time of these legislators. When you've got a Republican, majority in the House and the Senate in a state, it works this way on a federal level too. And then you've got the opposing party as the governor. Of course, they're going to be vetoing this kind of stuff. They're going to stop anything productive and conservative from happening in the state of Arizona. And that's why I think the push was so big. And the election results were so questionable because Katie Hobbs is really an inadequate governor for the state of Arizona. You know, she was Secretary of State, but I don't think she had an in-depth knowledge of the real problems that are facing Arizona, and the biggest one being an open border. And now for her to veto this latest legislation that was an attempt by our legislators to provide some protection for Arizona citizens, this just proves, folks, that this governor doesn't care about your safety here in the state of Arizona. We've got to make sure that we get a good, viable candidate, Republican conservative candidate, to run in the next governor election. We need to start, getting them ready now and getting them out to start meeting the public. I mean, it's years ahead of time, but we need to get name recognition. We need to have a person who's out in the community on a weekly basis and starting to talk to people now and listening to what the problems are and get a good plan and effect of what they need to do when they come in and win the election as the governor and get this ridiculous Democratic governor out of office here in Arizona. I don't know how much. I wanted to pull up this other article. There was an article here that a lot of the legislators are talking. So in Arizona's first legislative session with divided government in 14 years, the governor set a new record for the most vetoes in state history. So in 2023, she vetoed 143 bills. The previous record was set by the state's last Democratic governor, Janet Napolitano, who vetoed 58 bills. So you go from 58 as a record to a new 143. And she broke that record in April, thanks to vetoes of portions of the Republican budget proposal. So veto of the transgender bathroom bill. Yeah, that was another bill that I didn't read and go through. Republicans have criticized Hobbs over her vetoes. Senator Kim Bennett said that Hobbs is going back on her promise to support legislation with bipartisan support after vetoing an election security bill in May that passed with bipartisan support. That's another thing that I think that she needs to look at. And if the Democratic legislators who have more conversations and have the time to investigate these bills and know how it's going to affect the state, and if they're in agreement with the Republicans and vote to pass a bill, that is something a Democratic governor needs to look at, because she doesn't have the time, nor does she have the conversations with the legislators to understand the reasoning behind the bill. So I definitely think that was a good thing to point out. But anyway, we're dealing with a governor who doesn't like to see things set right, doesn't want the mayhem here in Arizona to quit. That's why, these elections, these primaries that are coming up July 30th here in Arizona, make sure you're voting for the right candidates so that they're the ones going up in the general election. Get all of your neighbors, friends, and family who are Republicans to get out and vote. This isn't the time to be disenfranchised and disillusioned and sick of politics. And I'm so sick of the politicians. Then do something about it. And I'm going to keep reiterating that to you guys from now until the general election in November. But we have to end today's podcast. And thank you for joining. And I will see you tomorrow.